Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Coach and Benway podcast. I'm Coach Red Pill, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Benway. And Dr. Benway, what are we going to be talking about? Oh, I think we're going to be talking about money, about somebody who is not giving somebody else the money that they deserve. What's that all about?
Well, you know, I never get paid fully for my services here,
Okay.
as you know.
Yeah.
I think you should start. You should start opening up those Coach coins that you keep tight around your ass. Your ass so tight you could eat coal and shit a diamond. We're talking about Patreon's little recent imbroglio.
Yeah.
Essentially, a gentleman by the name of Robert Spencer, associated with Jihad Watch. I think it's just one of those typical, crazy Muslims being crazy. I'm going to point a finger at you kind of guys. Well,
I mean, he's right-wing, anti-jihadi, I take it.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's not like, hey, here's the latest hits from the Jihad Airways kind of thing. No, this is a Jewish guy associated with David Horowitz, all that kind of jazz.
Oh, really? He's a neocon. Okay. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Well, I guess David Horowitz more or less is a neocon, but yeah. But needless to say, he has his thing, and for reasons that I'm not entirely sure why it's going on, MasterCard apparently, which is the processor, or their network is on the processing platform for Patreon, basically singled out Robert Spencer and said to Patreon, this is their story. Let's all take these things with a grain of salt a little bit. But Patreon, this guy's a no good Nick. Stop his presence on the platform. And Patreon complied. And what's interesting about this, we're going in a world of escalations. Yeah. As I had said, we should be thinking about. This is another episode of that, another example of this. Yeah. It's one thing when we have all of these social media platforms and mechanisms say, we don't want to, be associated with this, that, or the other. At the end of the day, outside of Patreon, which is kind of a gray zone, me being able to say whatever the hell I want to say on Twitter is certainly my preference to be able to do that. But if you were to take it away from me, my base in terms of the hierarchy of needs, it doesn't hit me where I live, really. Yeah. I mean, I could still survive and function as a human being without it. Once you start going into like the payment processors, in other words, the exchange of money and the connective tissue between all the various banks says, we're not allowing this.
Yeah, or this guy.
You're stepping into the next level. You're now hitting people where they live.
Well, okay, let's analyze it from, before going to the macro picture, I want to look at the specific case. Patreon doesn't have a problem saying we are banning you because of your activity. They did it to Lauren Southern. So they're very not cavalier about it, but they're upfront when they decide that they don't like you. Okay, so that they're saying that, MasterCard made me do it. I don't have any reason to doubt them, because if Patreon themselves wanted to ban Jihadi Watch, they would have said so. They would have said, oh, this is the reason they're violating TOS, and that's that. Okay, like they did with Lauren Southern. But the fact that they're pointing the finger at MasterCard, okay, let's assume for the sake of this conversation that MasterCard really was the one that pulled the plug on Jihadi Watch. So what did MasterCard say? MasterCard said to Patreon, well, you better get rid of this guy or we're going to pull our multi-million-dollar, perhaps even billion-dollar association and screw you over? Is that how it works, over one piddly nobody who's not even like a pebble in anybody's shoe? I mean, Jihadi Watch, no disrespect to the guy, but I had no idea who the guy was. I mean, nobody cares about the guy. He's just fringe and marginal and a nobody. So why is it that MasterCard singled this guy out? Assuming, like I said, that prima facie, everything's on the up and up. Why would they single it out? It doesn't make any sense. And why would MasterCard, strong arm Patreon over this one guy? That sounds weird.
It does sound weird. I don't really understand the motivation behind it per se. As I said, it's not as if this guy's positions are particularly, out of kilter for the dialogue that's been going on for decades.
Yeah.
He's clearly Jewish. It's not like
I didn't know he was Jewish, but okay.
Yeah. So people tend to tiptoe a little bit more lightly around that one, which is why I'm like I said, take Patreon's decision or stories with a grain of salt, because I feel like everybody wants to tiptoe around like, why was I censored? Were you single meing out because if it's a criticism against Islam, why me? Is it because I'm a Jew saying all this stuff? People use that rhetoric. They're afraid of it for sure.
Sure.
I ultimately really don't know why to pick up this guy versus anyone else, because they could easily have, if MasterCard was worried about their brand, they could have easily said, here's like 10 other people on Patreon, who, are much more easy to argue against.
Yeah.
That they could have gone for, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
And also, it's not obvious that this would affect the MasterCard brand, because we all know that credit card corporations and payment processing services, that whole behind the landing page kind of operation. I mean, the back office stuff. Nobody cares. Okay, the public in general does not care. It will not affect a company's brand. Or at least I do not see how this could possibly affect the MasterCard brand.
No, it won't, because MasterCard, like Visa, isn't even a bank itself. It's just the network that connects the banks.
Yeah,
and it's so ubiquitous along like Visa that for them to start worrying about anything is kind of irrelevant. It's like saying, we're worried about who's using the pipes because it's going to affect the brands of the pipes. No one gives a shit, because all they care about is that the pipes work.
Yeah.
Right. When the pipe busts, you care.
Yeah.
If the pipe doesn't bust, you don't care.
Yeah.
Now, MasterCard's and Visa and others, they're playing this is a little bit insider baseball here, but they're playing games about trying to build their brand awareness for sure. I mean, they have their little programs to make you familiar and happy to use MasterCard products. But end of the day, it's not really. This isn't really a matter which kind of interfered with their future state showcasing, and even then it's still a matter of, hey, we have new kinds of pipes at the end of the day.
Yeah, and the thing is, it really affects their brand negatively, because a lot of people are going to be saying, just like us, they're going to be saying, what the hell is going on? Why are you singling this guy out? I mean, because he's some rando, okay? Because again, first they came for the socialists, but I wasn't a socialist kind of thing, right? I mean, I'm not I don't care about these neocon, anti-jihadi people, right? I don't give a shit. I didn't even know that they existed. But now I do, and now I know that MasterCard could potentially fuck me over because I have the wrong opinion. What the fuck is that all about? I mean, that really bothers me. And I know, Benway, it bothers you.
Well, what's interesting also to me about it is that the man in question doesn't... He claims he doesn't have a MasterCard, which to me I find hard to believe. It's like you fall down on credit, you'd have a MasterCard kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, for the sake of argument, yes, it's conceivable he doesn't. So what's really happening here, it's not even as if MasterCard's dealing with one of their own customers directly. They're dealing with it indirectly. It's as if saying, oh yeah, we're not going to allow our mechanism to somehow even be used in your favor. And part of the reason I'm concerned about this, phrase it however you want, is I made a joke in somewhat earnest last week, maybe a week before, when Alex Jones was going through his trouble, that effectively, the local energy concern like Exelon or whatever, pick your favorite poison, the power company will shut off service to them because they don't want to be associated, with this. And so all of the mechanisms, like I said, that you have laying supporting the foundation of your primary hierarchy of needs, namely food, shelter, water, heating, cooling, all of that kind of thing. The extent to which the purging of people from the politic is going to reach that level, I mean, and admittedly, it's not like great as is. People are still trying to kill off other people's livelihoods.
Yeah. But
to the point where you start interfering with the root mechanisms you need to survive, there is only one outcome for that, and it's not going to be pleasant by any means. What's essentially going to happen, especially if they do this in volume, let's say they have, even just several thousands of people in the country say, we're shutting you off from the society, and even the basic things you need to survive are no longer going to be available to you. Well, your only recourse at that point is to just violently take a gun, go to whomever is denying you your existence and killing them.
Yeah.
Because that's fundamentally the situation they've put you in. They've basically said, it's time for you to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
it. So there's only one response to that. So this was when people say, how can you reasonably be fearful of a coming conflict? I said, well, it's because of situations like this.
Yeah.
You can easily see how this escalation occurs, where like every grocery store says, can't eat our foodstuffs here. We don't cater to people like you.
Yeah.
Even though, funny enough, we're supposed to bake the fucking cake.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For other persuasions, but not this one.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the situation we're in. And like I said, I just don't. Part of me feels like there's some big piece that I'm not comprehending to exactly your point. Like, this is the weird. If this is the guy you're making an example of, it must be the weirdest guy you could conceivably make an example of. The only thing I could think of is some Muslim at MasterCard, got pissy. I don't know.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It does not make sense at all. Okay, this is assuming that Patreon is on the up and up. Here's another thing. Why would Patreon lie and point the finger at MasterCard specifically?
Yeah, it's certainly a weird story, but we've certainly, in the past week, we've encountered many weird stories of various degrees of fiction from people.
No, we're
without going in.
Oh, you're talking about the Amorosa thing? Oh, screw that. That's just fucking boring.
Not just Amorosa, just a few other different things that I won't go into.
Oh, which one? Just touch on them.
No, I'm not going to mention it. But
you're talking about our little fat friend. Oh, yeah.
I can easily. I mean,
wait. Stop. Benway. No, I have to warn the listener. See, dear listener, for reasons of your safety and the safety of this podcast, and to ensure that it is not flagged, no name will be used in this podcast to refer to the flagger in charge. That was my best public service announcement voice, Jesus Christ. Okay, but we're not going to talk about that. But you were saying? I'm sorry.
What was I saying?
Oh, well, no, this whole thing of singling out somebody. Okay, like, look, does it mean that if I tweet the wrong tweet and I go down to the gas station to fill up the tank of gas and I take my MasterCard and stick it in the thing, it's going to say, your card has been declined because you said the wrong thing on Twitter? Is that how it's going to start to work? I mean, what the hell?
I remember my point. It was the question as to why Patreon would lie about this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much flack Patreon got around the time of the Lauren Southern incident, because that came pretty damn close to them switching, temporarily trying to switch their rules on how they, charge for, I think, the little Patreon moments. So they had a double whammy of, oh shit, we made a mistake here.
Yeah.
And people may not like us. So I can easily see their PR team is in kind of like, a freakish mode and like just willing to say whatever shit they need, because it doesn't make sense from either side to me why they would do this. It's really no benefit to either side to push this argument. Like I said, they could have easily done the Alex Jones thing if they really wanted to.
Well,
I don't know.
They could have ignored it. See, that's the thing. Just ignore it. Okay, so you have some asshole using your pipeline. Big fucking deal. Shit, I get like nasty comments every day. I mean, on the hour, every hour, I get like nasty comments on my channel. And I have a fairly popular channel. I get, on average, something like 90% upvotes on my YouTube videos. And I get lots of, comments and stuff like that are damn nasty, and I just put up with it. I just ignore it. Why can't these fuckers just ignore the opinions that they don't like? Why do they have to go and single out people? Because it scares everybody else. And it also makes people just hyper aware and starts to pressure them. Because, the Lauren Southern thing, insofar as Patreon is concerned, what Patreon wanted to do, dear listener, is that Patreon, it charges the people who use the service who get money from patrons, right? But Patreon, the company, decided, hey, we could double our fees if we also start to charge a little fee to the people actually making the donation. So we get a double scoop, right? And they would have gotten away with it too had it not been for the Lauren Southern fiasco, because they banned her. And so they banned her first, and then this measure came out, and everybody got pissed. And all of a sudden they realized, shit, we're getting a double whammy. So they walked back the fee, the double fee that they were planning. Had they not done the Lauren Southern stupidity, they would have been able to double dip. They would have been able to, muddle through, and everybody would have gotten used to the new normal. See, basically they were boiling the frog, And instead of raising the temperature by just a degree, they raised it by 5 degrees and then 5 degrees. And the frog jumped out of the water. Okay, that's what happened. Okay. And so I think that, once bitten, twice shy kind of situation, now they're probably thinking, shit, we've got the situation with Jihadi Watch. We'll just point the finger at the people actually responsible. Because, you see, Patreon would have no reason to lie that it was MasterCard, as opposed to, say, Visa, for instance, or American Express. See? So if they're pointing the finger at MasterCard, it was because it was MasterCard. You see how I'm working out the logic here? I don't know if you agree with it.
Well, no, I mean, it's certainly, it would make, let me put it this way. MasterCard would have denied it if they didn't think that they were responsible by now.
Yeah.
Because that would essentially be slander.
Yeah. Very serious slander.
And the question still remains why MasterCard would think this way. Why can't MasterCard just deal with it, right? Well, remember, MasterCard is an old organization. It's a big organization, relatively speaking. It's one of those organizations that can sort of rest on its laurels.
Yeah, sure.
They do. I mean, they're just they. It's not like they're not doing anything new. Like I said before, they are trying to do new stuff, but they're in that position where they have a nice cash cow of volume coming through, and their whole job is to kind of just make sure that the volume stays steady. When you're in a position like that, where you just kind of like managing your cash cow, it's very easy. This is typical how organizations operate over a period of time. When it's big enough, there's the administrative level of lack of talent, or people get in for whatever reason. It's like, we got to make sure we're a diverse workforce, all that other kind of thing. It's very easy for me to see that this, the progressive mentality has festered away in the brain of the organization to where in their little bubble of like-minded people, they've convinced themselves that somehow people like that are either a danger, or that they want, regardless of whether this guy really was a danger to anybody, they wanted to say, look, we have the capacity and the willingness and the capability of, dictating, what our brand is going to be associated with.
Yeah, I know.
In a direct direct.
I think it's so stupid. It's so stupid, because it's like, there's that famous phrase when they arrested the Rolling Stones over pot. Back in the 60s, some British politician said it was like breaking a butterfly on a wheel. Yeah, it's a little bit like that. It's like just doing such a huge effort for no reason. Who cares about these people? I mean, it's not even Alex Jones, right? I mean, at least, okay, Alex Jones, you can say he's got millions of people, fine. And he's like a influencer who's peddling conspiracy theories, fine. But Jihadi Watch, they're nobody. Really nobody. So I don't understand MasterCard, because thinking it through as we're speaking on this podcast, I've concluded that there is no way that this was not MasterCard, because Patreon would never put themselves in a position of blaming MasterCard if it wasn't true. Okay. And I think that Patreon has the incentive to deflect any blame to somebody else if they have to ban somebody. I think that the Lauren Southern thing really bit them in the ass, and also to their detriment, to Patreon's detriment. Lauren Southern is turning into a very, very serious journalist. The farmlands thing was a big deal. She made an announcement recently where she's sort of like stepping back from YouTube to concentrate more on long piece journalism, on the ground journalism, like the farmlands piece, which was about white farmers in South Africa. She's earning a lot of fucking credibility. She's becoming at least in our neck of the woods, she's becoming like a player, like a major force. She's no longer the trad thought. You can't dismiss her as just a trad thought who's just parroting anti-just SJW rhetoric. She's becoming like a real journalist. I'm a huge fan of hers. I have just enormous respect for her. I can't wait to see where she goes next.
She'll do something like Oriana Fallaci was during the 70s and the 60s. Do you remember who she was?
Yeah. She was that Italian journalist who did like all kinds of really great interviews. Offhand, I can't recall.
Well, she was very critical of Islam as well. She didn't like the encroachment of Islam into Europe, and she had a very spirited interview with, I think, the Ayatollah, if memory serves.
Yeah, that was a famous interview.
Very famous, yeah. She's really cool, a real cool woman. I recommend anybody look her up. She's, I think Lauren Southern could very well be like that.
Yeah.
And Patreon could have easily, Well, here's the thing about Patreon. Just look at their CEO and you'll realize why they'll
Oh,
never
yeah.
be cool enough with just making money.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
their CEO is typical hipster, bald headed, long bearded, soy boy kind of weakling who had
With the
his
open
little
mouth.
band. He had his creative shit that didn't work out for him, so he did his shift to business, which accidentally did work out for him, and now he wished someone else was running his company. I can't say that for certain, but the guy who runs Patreon comes across to me as a guy who probably is there for just say, I'm happy to get the money coming in and I'll do what they tell me, but I don't think he really has the chops to really be running the company. I've seen that happen a few times.
Oh, it happens all the time.
And
Yeah.
exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, whatever with Patreon. I'm not so much interested in Patreon in and of itself. As I said, I do think this level of escalation is going to happen because it's just the mentality of a lot of corporate culture now to say that your brand equity. I mean, some people in my class should pray to God that I never become in charge of the country, because if I am in charge, there will be a lot more show trials than have ever existed, and few will make it out. I mean, I'm dead serious on this one. There's no excuse that so many people in our business affairs, financial affairs, governmental and legal affairs have gotten away with so much for so long and are just openly dismissive of any notion of justice and respect for their fellow human beings, whatnot. Despite their rhetoric, they would all not make it under
A Benway dictatorship?
under Chairman Benway's thing. But I would execute them, but with love,
With love and kindness,
out of love,
Yeah, out of love.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Flashback to the end of Million Dollar Baby kind of thing. Yeah, like this shot will speed your heart up, and then your heart will stop, and it'll stay stopped. Oh man, but anyway, about this thing. Look, okay. On the one hand, people say, well, it's a private company. Shouldn't they have freedom of association, right? Yeah, well, then you run into this problem. Okay, you run into this problem where a company can say, okay, fine, freedom of association. I don't want to associate with you. Yeah, my system is ubiquitous. You need credit cards for just about everything. A modern citizen in this globe cannot function without at least a few credit cards. So I'm going to cut off your credit cards. Yeah, well, it's free association, baby. I mean, this is where the libertarian argument just falls apart. Okay, so
this is one of the most convoluted readings I've ever seen of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which is to say, this interpretation means that the Constitution, Bill of Rights only concerned itself with what the government could and could not do. It's certainly a reading, but it's like saying, these rights and this whole constitution, this whole social construction and rules we have really only limits itself to this one organization, and that all else is kind of fair game. Then on what basis are we saying any laws should apply? Why should murder limit itself right at the shouldn't that the right to kill or not kill just end at the state house as well?
mhm.
It just baffles me as to this assumption that nobody has to really operate under any sort of principles, because hey, it's still in my house it's a state of anarchy, or in my company only the only rules that can be dictated are my own. I mean, it seems to me we just have to accept the fact that the general rules you're going to develop for your society at large, or what you think of as what your government can and can't do, should be the same governing principles as how you expect other people to operate with each other. It seems to me that one naturally follows from the other. So if I can speak what I will on the public forum, I'm going to have legal right to speak it in the public forum that exists in Twitter, or the semi-private forum that exists in Twitter. These things, the separation of these things feels artificial, and I feel like that artificial separatedness is something that just feels like a vestigial limb from the 80s. You know what I mean? By that, I mean the idea that, what they're really saying at the end of the day is, um, I should be able to make the money I want under what condition I want. Fuck you, everybody else. That
Yeah.
that attitude, which kind of also was born out of the '60s boomer generation, because, like I said, they just look at the fucking demographics. The guys making money in the '80s were smoking dope in the '60s.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just how it was. And all of this shit that we've just internalized as to where the rules stop and start is just a byproduct of some fucker who doesn't want to be told what to do.
Yeah, look, I feel that the Constitution, yeah, it's not just for the government. And the government's role should be to be policing those collective organizations, such as corporations, such as unions, that can go against the interests or the welfare of the individual or the smaller player in the society. I mean, of course, unfairly. I'm not talking about straight up competition. I'm talking about unfair competition or using their size to basically bully and harass and abuse the individual or the smaller collective. I think that what MasterCard is doing here is that, look, MasterCard and Visa, they essentially have a monopoly or an oligopoly over credit card transactions, right? So they should be held to a standard of that, you cannot decline any person other than strictly financial reasons. Because it's perfectly fair that on the merits, MasterCard declines to give a credit card to somebody who's just not creditworthy. I mean, that's not the issue. The issue is, I mean, that's their business. But they can't decline them because of some political shit or some speech shit. That's why the whole notion of like Facebook, hooking up with the banks and getting the banking information, so that they can know the banking information of their users. I find that fucking Orwellian as all get out. And I cannot believe that somebody at Facebook actually thought that this was a good idea and that there wouldn't be like enormous pushback. Because, it's really getting to a point where it's just like the red star of the Solar Federation against every individual. You Rush fans will know what the red star of the Solar Federation means. It was like the one big power that had all of the information about every single citizen, and essentially all citizens were slaved to the Solar Federation. So it's just crazy. But we seem to be going in that direction, and there is resistance, but not enough. Because, like you say, we're all very good and fine for tweeting out shit and making inflammatory YouTube videos. But when it comes to going out on the street and busting heads, we tend to stay at home and watch TV, which is disappointing. But
so here's my kind of question where I'm trying to gauge is who's going to be next? You in two ways, right? If MasterCard wants to try something like this again, who do you think they do it against? Or alternatively, another way to look at it, which I think is actually more interesting, what's the next kind of big utility-ish kind of company that's going to do this?
Oh, that's impossible to know.
I'm seriously waiting for one of the utility companies, like I said, whomever is supplying energy to Alex Jones's studio is going to shut him off. I think that's going to be next.
Okay, if he gets to the level of utility, then I think that we're gonna have like a serious political crisis. Okay, because the online situation, okay, yeah, but here you have basically most utilities rather are state-regulated monopolies for obvious reasons. Now, when a utility starts to shut off people, okay, or cable service provider, because cable service providers are also monopolies, and these cable service providers often does not provide internet service. When they start shutting off people for political reasons, that is an issue that everybody from the farthest left to the farthest right should be all united and all opposed to, because you cannot have that. Because if you start to have that, then you're just really opening a Pandora's box that ultimately leads to violence. I completely agree. When it becomes an issue of like, oh, you have the wrong opinion, so we're going to shut off your heat or AC or electricity or internet or whatever the fuck, right? Then it's just like, get my gun, let's go and shoot these fuckers. Because what other option do you have?
That's my point. And I think, but here's the thing. In theory, yes, we all would get around and saying, hey, this just seems like a bad precedent for everybody involved. But there have been so many variations on that bad precedent that have been crossed that I think the other side has just finally committed themselves to. When it happens to our side, I'll cry foul. When it happens to their side, I'll make excuses. It's how this is playing out. Look at, like I said, look at how when they've got people fired for whatever, political reasons, like, you were at the Unite. Yeah, you were at the Unite the Right rally, you motherfucker. Yeah. Thomas Gunn, or James Gunn, writes 10,000 pro pedo tweets. Oh my God, why are they weaponizing free speech?
Yeah.
Or they're not weaponizing free speech in that case. Why are they using our tactics against us? That's only works when we do it. That is the mentality that happens. It's going to keep happening, which is why I say there's no real stopgap to thinking that this stuff won't happen. The only stopgap that really is there is if someone is clever enough to say, hey, Commonwealth Edison or whomever the Texas power company is, if you do this, it's probably really going to look bad for us and we don't know how to control it. So try to do something a little subtler or not do anything at all. That may be the only stopgap, but I'm at the point where I don't even believe that.
Well, actually, I think that if it were something that egregious, I think it would be a good thing because it would kickstart our movement. And really just have people say, fuck this shit. We got to go to war over this because this is, they're cutting off this guy's electricity or ability to communicate. Say that they cut off his internet or something like that because they don't like his opinion. Okay, I mean, no. That's just that is a bright line that got crossed, and we have to just man up, sack up, and go out there and man the barricades. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's my thinking. I mean. Because look, okay, the Facebook, YouTube, Apple, Spotify purge of Alex Jones in one fell swoop, okay, that really did set a bad precedent because ultimately there was a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing because nothing happened. Yeah, and everybody's saying, well, Alex Jones is making more money than ever now, so they're using that sort of like as the excuse to like, okay, just let it lie, kind of thing. And I think that was catastrophic. Okay. Okay. Here, I guess this is the question. I'm thinking of the Assange case because I think that Assange being holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy is just absurd. And his fears are justified because he will be extradited to the United States instantly. I mean, the second the Brits get a hold of him, he's on a plane to Washington to face a grand jury for a crime that, first of all, it's not a crime. Second, he's not a U.S. citizen. And third, it did not happen in the United States. So what the fuck is he facing a grand jury in the United States over this shit for, But anyway, the Alex Jones situation and the Julian Assange situation, it seems to me point to the same thing, that there is a fundamental apathy, a political apathy, that people aren't really going out there and cracking skulls over shit. And I don't know if it's like a tipping point where all of a sudden, it just builds and builds and builds, and all of a sudden there's a little thing that happens and everybody's like, fuck it, get my fucking shotgun. I'm going to go out there and blow away some Antifa motherfuckers. Is that what's going to happen? I'm asking genuinely.
Yeah, probably that is what I would see happening. For a lot of people, I think there's going to be a lot of frustration and difficulties that accumulate over time. And then eventually, per usual, some straw will break the camel's back. Eventually, and it could be something as simple as one guy whom nobody knows, but just, happens to be in our circle, think a certain way, and we're all kind of together. And think of the scene to those of you who've seen Dr. Zhivago, right? The movie. There's a scene after the soldiers kind of get tired of fighting on the front against Germany. They start to go home, and they're just deserting at this point. But as they're kind of heading back home to their farmlands or wherever they live, they encounter a fresh column of soldiers, and the officers are there saying, like, you've let the Germans in, you're going to come get it. They're going to come for your wives and your women and your children. And nobody really believes them. But one officer, gets himself into a vulnerable position. And one of the old soldiers just is like, I've had enough of this shit. shoots him right in the gut and kills him. And at that point, they start killing off the officers. And the idea there is, you can read it larger. It's like, eventually you reach a point where you don't give a fuck anymore. One guy makes a decision to take it to the next level, and everybody says, well, I guess we've crossed this Rubicon. Yeah. Let's get going. I have a feeling it'll be something like that.
Yeah, I suspect so too. I mean, something whereby everybody's just like, fuck it, because it usually starts that way. It usually is it just builds and builds and builds, and then there's that tipping point moment, and everybody just starts shooting up the place. I think of the Miley massacre, right? And it was basically that. It was like just the tension had built up, and then finally that platoon, they get to the village and they're like, fuck it, let's shoot them all. And it's kind of like human nature. And especially I've noticed that fact of like when people are frustrated, a collective group of people are frustrated, and you see the guy next to you start doing egregious violations out of the frustration that you feel. You feel that you have permission to go ahead and do the same thing.
It's almost like this is going to sound gross, but like you reach a situation where it's like synchronized periods. A bunch of women just they synchronize when they're together. It happens.
Yeah,
I've had that happen in an office environment where there's a bad vibe to the place and tensions just build up. And I mean, I've lost my composure at people. After like a bad week where I'm trying to dial a number on the phone system and the phone isn't working. Everybody's trying to micromanage my phone dialing. I just basically turn and says, just leave me the fuck alone to dial the goddamn phone. I say this out loud because it reaches that point. And everybody knows.
Yeah.
Shit builds like that. And then, that tension kind of remains.
Yeah.
Everybody just kind of feels it. I mean, not just because, you said, get the fuck away. I'm trying to dial the goddamn phone. It's just, a vibe that's just built up in the office. It doesn't belong to one person or other. It's just there. And I think people, to our younger listeners, you're going to get to this point. Trust me, when you start working in whatever setting, you're going to feel it. Yeah. And whether it's working or it's at school or it's just, living in a house with a bunch of people because you're sharing rent, it doesn't matter. A group of people together are going to have situations like this. And you can read it larger into the society. Eventually someone's just going to say, fuck it, just let me do my goddamn thing. And then, smash someone's head over. Yeah. With a rifle, but that's going to happen. I mean, and people could say, "Oh, are you calling for violence and everything?" I'm like, at this point, I see it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's
predictable. You can yell at me all you want. I've seen this little movie play out before.
Yeah, I mean, like I studied Russian history, and I specialized in the Russian Revolution, and it wasn't any. It really was not any one thing. It was just an accumulation of things that led to the February Revolution, where they overthrew the Tsar, and everybody was sort of like shocked when it happened. And that's the interesting thing, is that right after the February Revolution of 1917, after the Tsar had been overthrown, everybody was like, holy shit, we got rid of him. And everybody was sort of like, for a good 3-4 months, even reading, nearly, at the time that I studied this, nearly a century after the fact, you could sense the sort of like surprise that it had actually happened. It was sort of like something that it was inconceivable just a few short years or a few short months before. And all of a sudden, it had happened. That kind of thing. That's a thing about human nature, that all of a sudden, people just explode. What are they calling him? Sky Hero? Rich Russell? They're calling him Sky Hero.
Oh, yeah, something like that. I didn't remember.
Yeah, and he just, building and building, and then all of a sudden, fuck it, I'm taking the plane. It's going to be a remarkable thing, because I think, I suppose what's happening is that I believe that will happen. I'm just wondering when it will happen, or whether it will be diffused. Because, like, for instance, in 2008, 2010, when QE was in full swing, I was fairly convinced that they were going to blow up treasury bonds, that what they were doing insofar as quantitative easing and all the rest of it would eventually lead to the collapse of the dollar. And because I also looked at the fact of what they had done in 2008, and by 2010, it was increasingly clear that they weren't going to fix the underlying problems of the 2008 crisis. They were just going to double down, just make the banks bigger, just throw money at the problem, print money, just kick the can down the road. But eventually, you get to the point where if you keep on kicking the can, that can keeps on getting bigger and bigger and bigger until finally you can't kick it further down the road. You got to deal with it right then and there, right? And I thought to myself, well, they sort of like palliated the problems in 2008. They've kept on kicking money at the problem, showering it with money via QE. So one day they're going to have to, I was referring, of course, to the central banks, to the Federal Reserve, and also to a lesser extent the European Central Bank and the Bank of England. One day they're going to have to face the music. One day they're going to have to do something. And well, they've successfully kicked the can down the road for a decade. And they still haven't gotten to the point where they've had to deal with the situation. And by the way, Benway, I want us to do an episode about this because I think it's really interesting. And I still don't understand how it is that they've kicked the can down the road so long. And so I look at the social situation, the social pressure that's building up. And I wonder if that too will be kicked down the road and just, they will manage to turn up the heat on the frogs enough that they are boiling, but not so high that they jump out of the pot. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. I mean, and this is going to be, this will be a testament to the level of managerial capability that our class has left, which is to say, are they smart enough to recognize that the discontent is so severe that shit is really going to get the fan? I still think part of them are convinced that, we're dealing with a select bunch of people only, and if we just make a thrashing of those, everybody else will either be in line or everybody else will just recognize that, these were mean people. I don't think they realize the extent of the problem, and I have a feeling that they will misjudge. They will just ratchet up the screws and keep ratcheting up the screws, thinking that everybody will be in line until, as I said, too many people will be in a position where they have nothing to lose and will operate accordingly. Yeah. Which is foundational 101 for civil strife. I mean, and it's funny that the left doesn't entirely pick up on this, or just refuses to see things, because this has been their point for a long time with minority relations, right? The Black society, that you have to understand that they rioted because things got ratcheted up so much that they had to break shit and steal waterlogged TVs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They should be well aware of it, but I think they're convinced that structural white privilege means that nobody's really under pressure, which just pay attention to small communities. It's not true. People are under pressure.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I used to think that, what the hell's going on with all the fat people? And I used to think that, it's the processed food, that they must be putting stuff into it that's fucking them up or whatever. But I'm starting to think that, the opioid crisis and the fat people crisis is one and the same. It's everybody's life is miserable. And so they find joy or escape from this misery of their life any way they can, either by, meth or by food. It's the same goddamn thing.
When you are, I'm even saying this from experience, when you are in a very bad depression, right? This is from my own experience. I guess everybody deals with it differently. You kind of try to retreat inward to some extent. It's like going out, having people see you, even if you convince yourself that when you're outside and someone sees you, they immediately know that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Like, failed at this, or you're a bad person, whatever your story is, you convince yourself of this. So you force yourself to do things that require less effort of you. It's like, I'd rather stay inside, rather just watch TV. Even just cooking a complicated meal that, just by virtue of cooking it, invariably is going to just be healthy for you. It's just one of those things. Don't ask me why. I'll do the simple, I'll have the pizza, right? Or I'll order some McDonald's because I can just go in and out and nobody knows who I am, and I don't have to deal with it. That stuff accumulates, and I think it does harm you. I mean, I'm willing to bet there are a number of factors going in here, not the least of which is the way businesses handle food production. But nonetheless, I do think there's a severe depression that's just, and I don't mean depression in the economic sense, I think there's a psychological depression in a lot of people that's just reinforcing a very uncomfortable position that they're in.
Yeah.
And I can't blame them. It's like when you're depressed, it's fucked up. That's all I can say. You just don't feel like you're in control of anything.
Yeah. Exactly right. When you're depressed, yeah, you just want to hide, and also you turn to the thing that makes you feel happy. Okay, the thing that makes you feel happy and gives you a little bit of satisfaction. And what's something that makes everybody happy? Food in their tummy. You know, yeah. I mean, it's great when even when you have like a crappy meal, you feel like lethargic. Your brain just like you can feel the IQ points diminishing. From whatever it is, you lose about 30 IQ points, and you can veg out in front of the TV and watch whatever stupidity is on. After having like half a pizza, right? I mean, how do you feel after having half a Domino's pizza with all the trimmings, right? You just feel like you feel no pain, right? And how do you feel? Well, I've never done meth, so I have no idea how you feel after you do meth.
Let's just say let's just talk about this extreme, horrific situation you've just described, which is someone actually was so depressed that they thought to themselves, well, out of all of the great pizza choices I had in the United States, I went with Domino's. That's a level of that's a level of self-hate. That's way beyond. Okay. I say that I say this because this will like go over the heads of the English listeners. Who I know your only fucking pizza choice is Domino's, so you think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I know who you people are. It's not. Yeah. Don't convince yourself of it. It's just Papa because John's. You have no other options.
Which is the best pizza?
Oh, that's tough. Of the main brands, I don't know. I don't usually get a lot of big brands. The local brands in Chicago that I like, generally, I like Giordano's, and in my area, it's Beggars.
Yeah, but those are pizza. Like $50 pizzas. It's full of white people when you go to those restaurants. No, I'm talking about something that's more of la raza, man, cabrón. We be done with la raza, with el pueblo, man. No, I mean,
you're just telling me you want a quesadilla. It's okay, Coach.
No, but seriously, I mean, this is a serious point. That people are medicating themselves with food and methamphetamines. I mean, the opioid crisis. I mean, this is. And here's the thing: nobody's fucking talking about this shit. Nobody is talking about it. I mean, yeah, on the peripheries, here and there, some rando, some fringe person, especially on the right, they're talking about it. But the mainstream, they don't talk about it at all. And here's the other thing that I do not understand. I haven't lived in the United States, lived of like actually having an address in the United States since 2001. I go periodically. What the fuck is with the explosion of fat people? I mean, this was not the case. People used to drive as much as they do now, okay? So this shit that, people living a more sedentary life and they drive more and that's why they're so fat, that doesn't fly. In the last 20 years, I'm telling you, the number of fat people has exploded in a way that is, I find it shocking,
I think there's a few things. I think some that we've already talked about. I think that for a number of people, there is a state of depression.
Yeah.
But other things reinforce that, which is people don't cook. And I think that by not cooking, the tendency to eat out or eat fast food or even eat stuff that's frozen and you just heat is just horrible because there's just shit in that kind of food.
Oh yeah.
That is just not going to go down well with you.
No.
I know I feel like shit. I that's why I don't really eat too much like McDonald's or Burger King anymore. I feel like shit now after I eat it. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
But also, it's just a fundamental. Maybe I'm just saying this because I'm getting more adventurous in the kitchen. It's like, but when you're cooking something interesting, it's not necessarily hard, but you really got to think through, like, okay, I got to get all my ingredients in order, spend this amount of time cooking this thing, then I got to do this thing. It's not really a full exercise, but you're mentally doing a lot of activity and putting a lot of effort into where you're actually eating more healthy, even if all you're doing is just making a meal for yourself. Yeah. There's just something weird about it. I don't know how to just describe it, but there's a mental awareness and an activity that's going on which has you invested in things. And that's just fundamentally a lot of people just knew how to do. They used to teach home ec and teach you the basics of cooking and just shit like that kept you busy.
Yeah.
And so there's that element. Tying into this as well, I've seen it in my own class, my own class is the so-called health conscious class, but I know that when they force us to work late because, we're all working for the greater good. And, if you're not spending, a night late at the office, you're not putting in enough time. kind of thing. And when people are stressed out with work and doing that shit, they just say, I don't have time to cook. I just need something quick.
Yeah.
And you just give it to me, whatever. Shit like that happens.
Yeah.
And I'm also just convinced that, whatever they're putting in the fucking vegetables, the hormones in the meat, this shit just, we're the top animal on the food chain. This shit's going to accumulate in your gut.
Yeah.
I just can't believe that whatever is accumulating in there, just given, again, mass production, laziness, whatever you want for the sake of just maintaining the food supply and the production levels. I know they're taking shortcuts.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that I think that later in a few decades, they're going to start looking back at this period insofar as the foodstuffs that people were eating. I think that it's not so much the hormones in the animals anymore, although I do agree that that probably has some influence, especially in chickens. But I think that it has more to do with the preservatives.
Yes.
The preservatives have a huge impact on our metabolism in ways that are not natural, that are incredibly harmful, as a matter of fact. Because like you, I used to be able to eat McDonald's, by the fistful, right? But now, I eat a burger and some fries and a Coke, and I have a headache. I have a headache, and I just feel not very good.
Same thing. Bad headache. My guts are shredded. I can't sleep very well.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like I'm nauseous. I can't do it. And I think if it's just a clear sign to me that my body's saying you're making a mistake.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is also, the only thing that cures those symptoms is more.
Oh God, yeah.
And
that's it's like alcoholism.
Yeah, exactly, like a drug addiction. Yeah, exactly right. And so that's not a good sign at all. I mean, if the food you're eating essentially makes your body react to it as if it were a drug, that is not a good sign at all. And nobody says a goddamn thing. It's happening everywhere. You and I are having this conversation. You and I are describing roughly the same symptoms. You think that we're the only two people on the face of the Western world that feels this? No, everybody does, but nobody's talking about it. And that's the thing. Nobody talks about this shit. Nobody talks about the fact that the food is fucking us up, and we are expected to live a life where we are poisoning ourselves.
I think that there's a wonderful line. I don't know. Have you ever read the book or seen the movie Under the Volcano?
Yeah, I've never gotten around to it. I know that both are supposed to be very good.
It is good. The premise of that story is this consulate figure in Mexico, the British consulate, right before World War II. You could tell this guy is meant to be a proxy for a sort of lost generation type figure who is just, self-destructive alcoholic, right? And the whole book is him, his relationships deteriorating, his marriage deteriorating, his best friend relationship deteriorating, all these kinds of things. And you really get into the details of someone who's drinking that has reached that point where they can't just not drink, because to not drink will also kill them. And there's a great line there, which I think can just as easily sum up this condition, I think, in a lot of society. He says, "Surely you must understand the narrow line I must walk between the shakes of too little and the abyss of too much."
Yeah. That's a creepy...
Yeah, it's that's the situation I think a lot of folks find themselves in. And honestly,
it feels that as a society, we're on that edge,
The only way out of that is a sense of purpose, and oftentimes it could be as simple as having a job. When you have something to do, frankly, you just get preoccupied.
Yeah.
Yes, and there's something healthy also just bitching about the boss to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And there was a great line. I think this is a Marxist line, so I'll give them credit where credit's due. They said the only thing worse than being exploited as a worker is not being exploited as a worker. Like that, they grokked it, right? It's not just about there's not work, or the work sucks, right? It's the terror of not working or not having purpose, and not having any kind of function in the society. And I think just way too many people find themselves in a position where I don't have a function, whether I'm employed or not, kind of is sort of related, sort of not related to a certain extent. And when you're in that position, it's like, whatever, fuck it, whatever just gets me through the day kind of situation. And that's disastrous.
Yeah, I think that our whole society is like that because it's stripped people away of their purpose because you're living for yourself. And the thing is, see, hedonism, living for yourself like that, is just, ironically enough, it's not enough of a motivation for the vast majority of people. The only people who it is enough of a motivation are for, extreme narcissists. I mean, sociopaths, really. That level of narcissism. Because most people are just, it's kind of like they're too lazy to live for themselves, but they are more than happy to be living for other people, to be working and striving and sacrificing for their family, for even something as vague as their nation. But when you strip every purpose except the self, it's just depressing. It's just depressing, and you don't really want to do it. I mean, times in my life when I have been working for myself, quote unquote, it's never been particularly productive. It's only been productive when I'm aiming for something or striving for the sake of somebody or some situation that I want to achieve. But if it's just striving for myself, I just want to watch TV. You know what I mean?
I do. And this is why the whole variations on the censorship themes that we've been discussing, what Alex went through, what this Jihadi Watch went through, why I think it's particularly nefarious, because I think the end goal of these censorship pieces, regardless of the immediate, I don't want this voice queering my hustle, I think the real nefarious part of it is what it's effectively doing. It's trying to relegate people to that position of removing all purpose and just being, you're just a blob in front of the TV waiting to die. I honestly think that's part of how disgusting this is, because you just force someone to be in that position. Even if your the little meaning in your life is to have a Twitter account where people follow you and listen to you. If someone decides you can't even have that, all you're relegated to is being in front of the TV and eating, that's a death sentence.
Yeah.
They want you to die.
Yeah.
That's why I don't think it's necessarily as simple as saying like, oh, we just have these bad thoughts that we don't want to get rid of. No, you want to kill off people.
Yeah.
Who don't think the way you do. You may not admit it. Some of you do it.
Yeah, because
I think it's in your brain.
I think so, because you look at a guy like Alex Jones. I mean, like Alex Jones, the man, right? And he goes off and turning the freaking frogs gay and all the rest of it, right? But you got a sense that if he were not ranting, he would be about twice as fat as he is now. I mean, he's a big guy, and he is overweight, but he'd be twice as overweight as he is now. In front of the TV, just like not having bathed in a few days, in his wife beater T-shirt and his boxer shorts, both of which would be soiled, and dirty from lack of changing, from lack of hygiene, from lack of doing laundry, staring at the TV in a double wide in some shithole trailer somewhere, waiting to die. I mean, the fact that he's able to rant and rave, oddly enough, gives his life purpose and meaning, right? And it seems like that, in the name of peace and decorum, people are stripping away your right to rant. Man, it's
well, they do, because it's just more beneficial to them as a buyer and a set of eyes at the end of the day. I mean, I see it in my own, in the own work environments that I've seen. They prefer people just shut up, do what is being told of them, and just go away after a certain point. No, I see less and less interest in leadership. Let me rephrase it. I see that leaders have less and less interest in actually building their people, building company and everything. Yes, some people do it, but at the end of the day, I think people are interested mostly in just saying, I have all of this money, or my company has the biggest net worth and everything. I'm not too concerned with, whether all my employees are, happy, healthy, whatnot. Yes, they pay a little bit of lip service to, SJWism, but I think at the end of the day, that the leadership's only giving that lip service because they know they have to have these people, or they think they have to have these people in administrative roles. They just kind of like in one ear, out the other, just let them do their thing, honestly, because they don't give a shit.
Yeah, I think what it is in the name of living for yourself and this kind of like hedonism, right? The capitalist neoliberal economic paradigm has able to co-opt people's efforts and motivation and drive them into building up the economy, relentless growth. We as a society have lost sight of what makes a good life. We're not even asking what makes a good life. I mean, not even the left is asking that question, which is the question. What makes a good life? How do you live a good life? What should you strive for? What should you aim for? And I think that we can all agree, very casually and clearly and forthrightly and firmly that living for yourself is not a good life. It is a very reduced life. You have to strive for something greater than yourself to have a good life. And the fact that our neoliberal capitalist paradigm has stripped away that possibility, has even, stripped away the possibility of even asking the question. And all it's, just live for yourself and make money and have a lot of sex and buy a lot of things that you don't need and just work and grow. You know what I'm saying? We have lost sight of the good life. And that's why we have these problems. Because we're not asking what is the good life. If we just ask the question, what makes a good life? We'd instantly sort of like look up from this grindstone that we're on and realize, shit, this isn't it. We got to make a change. You see what I mean? Just asking the question is enough.
It's funny. I was looking back the other day. I was watching the original Sabrina, the movie Sabrina with Humphrey Bogart, Audrey Hepburn.
That was a great movie.
A very good movie. And as typical with a lot of movies in the 50s, there are moments of, pro-capitalist propaganda in it. You have to say we're important relative to the Russians. But funny listening to the rhetoric of it. You have Humphrey Bogart, his character Linus Larrabee, big multi-industrialist. They ask him, why is he doing all these things? Are you just out for making money? And his whole speech was, really, no, it's not just about making money. That's certainly part of it. But, when it's about building up something, and I have all of these things that, these companies and these interests and industries at play. And as a result, some guy who is making a quarter before is making $1.50, and he, his family is better. It was a focus on how all of this stuff is building up the society as a whole.
Yeah.
Fast forward to I'll bring back a book we mentioned, Eat, Pray, Love. What is the whole message about, which I still think is a capitalist message.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of the day is all about, really
consuming.
What you should be doing is consuming these things that define who you are. Because if you consume certain things in the right manner, in the right order, in the right fashion, you'll say who you are.
Yeah.
That's great because I have more shit I could sell you and more permutations that I could sell you.
Yeah.
And it's all about this, the self-fulfillment you get in Eat, Pray, Love is just a credo to say, buy my shit.
Yeah. Exactly.
Much different from what Linus Larrabee was talking about in Sabrina.
Exactly.
Which is a really roundabout and odd way for me to say watch the movie Sabrina, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And so on that note, I think that we're going to call it a podcast. Because this is a good note and something positive to end up on. Because I'm realizing I'm black-pilled as fuck today, and so just let's end on a cheery note and that vision, that ethereal vision of Audrey Hepburn. Oh man, I fell in love with her the first time I saw her. She is just Audrey Hepburn was the epitome of what. She was just awesome. She is just like. She's just so delicate and beautiful in that movie and every movie that she did at that period, Roman Holiday and what was the other pictures that she did? I didn't like Breakfast at Tiffany's, but she was great in it, but I didn't like the movie as a movie. Roman Holiday,
also
Sabrina.
My Fair Lady, which is a little older. Yeah. A whole bunch of things she did.
She was great.
Good.
Yeah.
There was my favorite scene, and this is the note I want to end on, and we'll call it a podcast of this. There's a great scene in Sabrina where Sabrina thinks she's in love with Linus's younger brother, but she may be in love with older Linus, Humphrey Bogart. He has this great bit where he says, he said, because she's just been to France. He says, how do you say, I have a yellow pencil. J'ai un crayon jaune. And he says, how do you say my brother has a beautiful girl? And she says what it means. And he says, how do you say I wish I were my brother? And that little sentimental stuff like that gets to me because I'm an old, sentimentalist at heart. But that's great, because you believe him.
Yeah, because that one thing, people don't give Humphrey Bogart enough credit as an actor because they always say that he was a cool guy. Yeah, he was cool, but he was a great actor, and only a great actor could have pulled that off, of saying those lines and not coming across as some kind of wuss or some kind of, sentimental fool. He's still Humphrey Bogart. He's still cool, but he's got a heart. Yeah. Praise be to Humphrey Bogart and praise be to Audrey Hepburn, wheresoever they may be. I mean, yeah, and William Holden too.
Yeah, in a world of MasterCards and Patreons and Jacks of the world, don't be a Jack. Be Audrey and be Humphrey.
Yeah, exactly right. On that note, dear listener, thank you so much for listening to the Coach and Benway podcast, and we will catch you soon. Take it easy.